President Kim Dae-ho stood at the tall windows of his office on Earth and looked up at the stars. He was 52 years old and had been leading Earth for 8 years now. The people trusted him because he always kept his word and never backed down when Earth needed defending. His black hair had some gray in it now, but his eyes were still sharp and focused. He wore a simple dark blue suit that made him look both important and approachable at the same time. Tomorrow he would travel to Nexus Prime for another meeting with the Galactic Council. These meetings happened every few months, and Kim Dae-ho had attended dozens of them over the years. The other species in the galaxy still treated humans like children who had just learned to walk among the stars. Earth had joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, but many of the older species acted like 50 years was nothing more than a brief moment. Admiral Park So-young entered his office without knocking. She was his closest friend and advisor, and one of the few people who could walk into his office anytime she wanted. She was 47 years old and had spent her entire adult life in Earth's Space Defense Force. Her uniform was always perfect, and her short black hair never had even one strand out of place. She carried a datapad in her hand, and her expression told Kim Dae-ho that she had something important to discuss. "The intelligence reports from the outer colonies are getting worse," Park So-young said as she handed him the datapad. "The Vorthans are making moves near our trade routes again. They keep claiming it's just routine patrols, but their ships are getting closer to our merchant vessels every week." Kim Dae-ho took the datapad and read through the reports quickly. The Vorthan Empire was one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, and they never let anyone forget it. They had been flying between stars when humans were still living in caves on Earth. Their technology was advanced and their military was huge, but they had grown lazy over the centuries. They believed their age and experience made them superior to every other species. "How many ships are we talking about?" Kim Dae-ho asked as he continued reading. "At least 40 vessels in the past month," Park So-young replied. "They're not just watching our trade routes anymore. They're studying them, learning our patterns and timing. This feels like preparation for something bigger." Kim Dae-ho set down the datapad and walked back to the windows. The stars looked peaceful from Earth, but he knew that space was becoming more dangerous every day. The Galactic Council talked about peace and cooperation, but several species were clearly preparing for conflict. The humans had been trying to expand their territory and influence through trade and diplomacy, but other species saw this as a threat to their own power. "What does Ambassador Lee think about the situation?" Kim Dae-ho asked. "Lee Taemin sent his own report yesterday," Park So-young said. "He believes the Vorthans are testing us. They want to see how we respond to pressure. If we do nothing, they'll keep pushing until they find our breaking point." Lee Taemin had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years. He was a smart diplomat who understood alien cultures better than almost any other human. He had learned to speak 17 different alien languages and had studied the history and customs of every major species in the galaxy. If Lee Taemin thought the Vorthans were preparing for trouble, then Kim Dae-ho took that warning very seriously. "I'll address this issue at tomorrow's council meeting," Kim Dae-ho said. "The trade routes belong to all council members according to the galactic treaties. The Vorthans have no right to interfere with legitimate commerce." Park So-young nodded, but her expression showed she wasn't completely satisfied with that answer. "Sir, I think we should increase security for your trip to Nexus Prime. Let me send additional ships to escort your transport." Kim Dae-ho shook his head. "That would send the wrong message. If I arrive with a military escort, the other species will think I'm looking for a fight. We need to show them that Earth still believes in diplomatic solutions." "But, sir, the intelligence reports suggest." "I understand your concerns, Admiral, but I've made my decision," Kim Dae-ho said firmly. "I'll take the normal diplomatic transport with the usual security detail. We can't let fear change how we operate, or the other species will see that as weakness." Park So-young didn't argue further, but Kim Dae-ho could see she wasn't happy about his decision. She had been protecting him for years, and her instincts about danger were usually correct. Still, he believed that showing strength through confidence was better than showing strength through weapons. The next morning, Kim Dae-ho's transport ship left Earth's orbital dock right on schedule. The ship was called the Harmony, and it was designed for diplomatic missions rather than combat. It had comfortable quarters for the diplomatic staff and meeting rooms where important conversations could happen during long flights between star systems. The ship's crew was small but highly trained, and they had flown Kim Dae-ho to dozens of meetings over the years without any problems. The flight to Nexus Prime took 18 hours through hyperspace. Kim Dae-ho spent most of the journey reviewing his speech and studying the latest reports about trade disputes and territorial disagreements between various species. He wanted to be prepared for every possible topic that might come up during the council meeting. Nexus Prime was a planet that belonged to no single species. The Galactic Council had chosen it as their meeting place because it was located roughly in the center of council space and because its neutral status meant no species could claim special authority there. The planet had one large city built specifically for diplomatic functions and not much else. Thousands of diplomats, ambassadors, and support staff from dozens of different species lived and worked there. When the Harmony arrived at Nexus Prime, Kim Dae-ho was greeted by Ambassador Lee Tae-min and his diplomatic staff. Lee Tae-min was 39 years old and had the kind of calm personality that made him good at dealing with difficult alien politicians. He had black hair that he kept neat and short, and he always wore traditional Earth diplomatic robes during official functions. "Mr. President, the council meeting has been moved to the main assembly hall," Lee Tae-min said as they walked through the spaceport. "Apparently, they're expecting a larger attendance than usual for your speech about the trade route expansion proposal." "Larger attendance could be good or bad," Kim Dae-ho replied. "Do we know which species are sending extra representatives?" "The Vorthons have brought twice their normal delegation," Lee Tae-min said carefully. "Several other older species have also increased their numbers. I think your proposal has gotten more attention than we expected." Kim Dae-ho nodded. He had proposed expanding human trade routes to include several star systems that were currently underdeveloped. The plan would benefit all council species by increasing commerce and creating new opportunities for cooperation. However, some of the older species seemed to view any human expansion as a threat to their traditional dominance in galactic affairs. The main assembly hall on Nexus Prime was huge and could hold representatives from every council species at the same time. The building was designed to impress visitors with its size and grandeur. Tall columns supported a ceiling that seemed to stretch up forever, and the floor was made from polished stone that reflected light from hundreds of sources. When Kim Dae-ho entered the assembly hall, he saw that Lee Tae-min had been right about the increased attendance. The hall was more crowded than he had seen it in years. Representatives from species he rarely saw at council meetings were sitting in sections that were usually empty. The Vorthon delegation had indeed doubled in size, and their representatives were wearing their most formal robes, which usually meant they were preparing for an important announcement. Kim Dae-ho took his place at the speaker's podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. He had given speeches in this hall many times before, but something felt different today. The atmosphere seemed more tense than usual, and many of the alien representatives were watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "Fellow council members," Kim Dae-ho began, "I come before you today to discuss opportunities that will benefit all our species through expanded commerce and cooperation." He continued with his prepared speech about trade routes and economic development, but he noticed that several delegates seemed distracted or were whispering among themselves. About halfway through his speech, Kim Dae-ho saw a figure moving in the upper gallery where visitors and staff members usually sat during council meetings. The figure was wearing a hooded cloak that concealed their species and identity, but something about their movement caught his attention. They were positioning themselves directly above the main floor where he was speaking. Kim Dae-ho continued his speech but kept one eye on the figure in the gallery. His security training from years ago was telling him that something was wrong, but he didn't want to cause a scene by stopping his speech or calling for security unless he was sure there was a real threat. The figure in the gallery raised their hand and Kim Dae-ho saw a small device pointed in his direction. In that instant he realized what was happening, but there was no time to react or take cover. A beam of energy that was completely invisible struck him in the chest, and Kim Dae-ho felt his entire body begin to dissolve at the molecular level. The news of President Kim Dae-ho's death reached Earth within hours of the assassination. Acting President Choi Min-ho was in his office reviewing agricultural reports when Admiral Park So-young burst through his door with tears streaming down her face. She could barely speak as she handed him the emergency communication from Ambassador Lee Tae-min on Nexus Prime. Choi Min-ho was Kim Dae-ho's vice president and had worked closely with him for 6 years. He was 50 years old and had spent most of his career in civilian government rather than military service. His specialty was domestic policy and economic planning, which made him very different from his predecessor. Where Kim Dae-ho had been bold and charismatic, Choi Min-ho was careful and thoughtful. He preferred to study problems thoroughly before making decisions. The security footage shows a Vorthon assassin, Park So-young said, when she finally found her voice. Ambassador Lee confirmed the weapon signature matches Vorthon military technology. This was not some random attack. This was planned and executed by the Vorthon Empire. Choi Min-ho read the report 3 times before he fully understood what had happened. His friend and mentor was dead, and Earth's relationship with the galaxy had just changed forever. The Vorthons had committed an act of war by assassinating a sitting council member, but they were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. How could Earth possibly respond to such an attack? What is Ambassador Lee's assessment of the Council's reaction? Choi Min-ho asked. They're calling it an unfortunate incident. Park So-young replied with anger in her voice. The Vorthon delegation claims it was a rogue agent acting without official authorization. They've offered to pay compensation to Earth and promised to investigate the matter internally. The Council leadership seems willing to accept this explanation. Choi Min-ho felt a cold rage building inside him, but he forced himself to remain calm. The galaxy's political system was dominated by old species who had been maintaining the status quo for thousands of years. They would not risk a major conflict over the death of one human leader, especially when accepting the Vorthon explanation, allowed everyone to avoid an uncomfortable war. Summon the Security Council immediately, Choi Min-ho ordered. I want our top military and intelligence officials here within the hour. We need to discuss Earth's response to this situation. While Park So-young made the necessary calls, Choi Min-ho walked to his window and looked up at the same stars that Kim Dae-ho had been studying just 2 days earlier. The galaxy suddenly felt much more dangerous and hostile than it had that morning. Earth had been trying to build relationships and expand influence through peaceful means, but the assassination proved that other species were willing to use violence when they felt threatened by human progress. The emergency security meeting included Admiral Park So-young as head of the Space Defense Force, General Shin Woo-jin as head of military intelligence, and Dr. Yoon Ji-woo as Earth's leading expert on alien biology and technology. These 3 people had been preparing for exactly this kind of crisis for years, even though they had hoped it would never come. Dr. Yoon Ji-woo was 41 years old and had dedicated her entire career to studying alien species and their weaknesses. She was small and quiet, but her mind was one of the sharpest on Earth when it came to understanding alien physiology and technology. She had been working on classified projects for the military that most people didn't even know existed. General Shin Woo-jin was 55 years old and had been planning Earth's defense strategies since humans first made contact with alien species. He was tall and serious and rarely smiled, but everyone who worked with him knew he was completely dedicated to protecting Earth and human interests. He had been warning for years that Earth needed to be prepared for exactly this kind of situation. What are our options? Acting President Choi Min-ho asked once everyone was seated around the secure conference table. Officially, we have very few options, General Shin replied. The Galactic Council has accepted the Vorthon explanation and closed the matter. If we push for further action, we'll be seen as troublemakers who can't accept diplomatic solutions. The other species will isolate us politically and economically. Unofficially, Dr. Yoon asked. Unofficially, we have been preparing for this possibility for decades, General Shin continued. Earth has never been fully integrated into the galactic political system. We've maintained independent research programs, military capabilities, and intelligence networks that the other species don't know about. We have options they can't imagine. Admiral Park leaned forward. Sir, I've been analyzing the assassination footage and something doesn't add up. The weapon used was definitely Vorthan technology, but the assassin's movement patterns and escape routes suggest professional military training. This wasn't some rogue agent. This was a coordinated operation. Dr. Yoon opened her datapad and showed the others a detailed analysis she had prepared. I've been studying Vorthan biology and technology for 15 years. Their molecular disruptor weapons leave specific energy signatures that can be traced back to the exact facility where they were manufactured. If we can get close enough to analyze the residual energy at the crime scene, we can prove this weapon came directly from Vorthan military stockpiles. Acting President Choi Min-ho studied the faces around the table. These people had been preparing for war while he had been focused on domestic policy and economic development. Now he needed to decide whether Earth would accept the galaxy's judgment or take matters into their own hands. What would unofficial action look like? He asked carefully. General, Shin activated a holographic display that showed detailed maps of Vorthan space. We have intelligence assets throughout their empire that have been gathering information for years. We know the location of every major military installation, research facility, and government center. We also know their weaknesses. Their main weakness is arrogance, Admiral Park added. They haven't fought a real war in over 300 years. Their military has become a ceremonial force that focuses more on parades and demonstrations than actual combat readiness. They assume their reputation and advanced technology will prevent anyone from challenging them directly. Dr. Yoon brought up another display showing Vorthan physiological data. I've also identified biological vulnerabilities that could be exploited if necessary. The Vorthans have modified their atmospheric processors to create artificial environments that are perfect for their species but deadly to most others. However, these same processors could be turned against them with the right knowledge and equipment. Acting President Choi Min-ho realized that his advisors had been planning for this scenario much longer than he had imagined. While Earth's civilian government had been focused on diplomacy and trade, the military and intelligence services had been preparing for the possibility that peaceful coexistence might not be possible. How long would we need to prepare for unofficial action, he asked. The preliminary phase is already underway, General Shin replied. I activated certain protocols immediately after receiving news of the president's death. Our deep space monitoring stations are tracking all Vorthan ship movements, and our intelligence assets are gathering additional information about their current military status. What about the other species? Acting President Choi Min-ho asked. If we take action against the Vorthans, how will the rest of the galaxy react? That depends on how we handle the situation, Admiral Park replied. If we act like the primitive humans they think we are and launch obvious attacks against Vorthan targets, then the other species will unite against us. But if we're smart about how we proceed, we can make it look like internal Vorthan problems rather than external attacks. Dr. Yoon nodded in agreement. The key is making our response seem proportional and defensive rather than aggressive. We need to gather proof that the assassination was officially sanctioned by the Vorthan government. Once we have that evidence, we can justify whatever actions we take as legitimate self-defense. Acting President Choi Min-ho stood up and walked around the conference table. The decision he made in the next few minutes would determine Earth's future in the galaxy. He could accept the Council's judgment and try to move forward through peaceful means, or he could authorize actions that would fundamentally change humanity's relationship with every other species. I need someone to investigate what really happened on Nexus Prime, he said finally. I want proof of Vorthan government involvement in the assassination. I also want detailed intelligence about their current military capabilities and any potential weaknesses we could exploit. General Shin smiled for the first time during the meeting. I have exactly the right person for that mission. Major Yang Hye-jin is our best specialist in alien infiltration and intelligence gathering. She's been studying Vorthan culture and language for years, and she can pass for several different species when necessary. How long would such an investigation take? Acting President Choi Min-ho asked. Give me 3 weeks, General Shin replied. Major Yang can infiltrate Vorthan space, gather the intelligence we need, and return with proof of their government's involvement. Once we have that evidence, you can decide how Earth should respond. Dr. Yoon closed her datapad and looked directly at Acting President Choi Min-ho. "Sir, there's something else you should know." Major Yang Hyejin stood in the cargo hold of a smuggler's ship as it approached the outer edge of Vorthon space. She was 34 years old and had spent 12 years in Earth Special Forces, learning how to operate behind enemy lines. Her black hair was dyed blue to match current Vorthon fashion trends, and her skin had been temporarily altered with special chemicals to give her the pale complexion that Vorthons found attractive in their servants. She carried forged identification, papers that showed her as a translator and cultural advisor from a minor species that traded regularly with the Vorthon Empire. The cover identity had been carefully constructed over several months and would pass inspection by any Vorthon security system. Her real mission was to infiltrate the Vorthon government and find proof that President Kim Dae-ho's assassination had been officially authorized. The smuggler captain was a Kepler named Rax, who had been working with Earth's intelligence services for 3 years. His species was known for being neutral in galactic politics and excellent at moving people and cargo without attracting attention. Rax had gotten Yang Hyejin past 2 security checkpoints already, and now they were approaching the most dangerous part of the journey. "Vorthon patrol ship is requesting cargo manifest and passenger list," Rax said over the ship's communication system. "Remember your cover story and let me do most of the talking." Yang Hyejin activated the translation device hidden in her collar and waited while Rax transmitted their forged documents to the Vorthon patrol ship. Her heart was beating faster than normal, but her training had taught her to use nervous energy to stay alert and focused. She had memorized every detail of her cover identity and could answer questions about her supposed background for hours without making a mistake. "Cargo ship Wanderer, you are cleared to proceed to Vorthon Prime," came the reply from the patrol ship. "Dock at Commercial Port 7 and submit to standard biological screening before disembarking." Yang Hyejin felt relief wash over her, but she knew the most dangerous part of her mission was just beginning. Getting into Vorthon space had been the easy part. Now she needed to get close enough to high-ranking government officials to learn the truth about the assassination plot. Vorthon Prime was the capital world of the Vorthon Empire and home to over 2 billion Vorthons. The planet's surface was covered with massive cities connected by high-speed transportation networks. The architecture was designed to impress visitors with towering spires and gleaming surfaces that reflected the light from the system's 3 suns. Everything about Vorthon Prime was meant to demonstrate the Empire's power and ancient glory. Yang Hyejin's cover identity gave her access to the government district where she was supposed to provide translation services for trade negotiations between the Vorthons and several minor species. The job would let her move freely through government buildings and potentially overhear important conversations. Her real goal was to access the communication systems used by the Vorthon High Command. The first week of her assignment went smoothly. Yang Hyejin attended boring meetings about mineral rights and shipping schedules, while carefully mapping the security systems and communication networks in the government complex. The Vorthons treated her with the casual contempt they showed to all inferior species, but they also largely ignored her presence during sensitive discussions. On her 8th day, Yang Hyejin finally got the breakthrough she had been hoping for. During a trade meeting, she overheard 2 Vorthon officials discussing increased security measures that had been implemented after what they called the Nexus Prime operation. One of them mentioned that High Commander Vex was still receiving daily reports about human reactions to their message. That evening, Yang Hyejin used her access codes to enter the government complex after normal working hours. She had studied the security patrol schedules and knew exactly when and where she could move without being detected. Her target was High Commander Vex's private office, where he kept his personal communication records. Breaking into Vex's office required skills that Yang Hyejin had learned during years of special operations training. The door locks used both digital codes and biometric scanners, but she had devices that could fool both systems. Getting past the security cameras required more creativity, but she had spent hours studying their coverage patterns and blind spots. Once, inside Vex's office, Yang Hyejin went straight to his personal computer terminal. Fourth-hand data security was advanced, but Earth's intelligence services had been studying their systems for years. She connected a small device to the terminal that began copying files while she searched through physical documents on Vex's desk. What she found exceeded her most optimistic expectations. High Commander Vex had kept detailed records of the entire assassination plot, including planning meetings, authorization codes, and after-action reports. The documents proved beyond any doubt that President Kim Dae-ho's murder had been planned and approved at the highest levels of the Vorthan government. The assassination had been codenamed Operation Humility, and its stated goal was to remind the upstart humans of their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. The documents showed that several other species had been consulted about the plan and had given their tacit approval. Even some members of the Galactic Council leadership had known about the plot in advance. Yang Hyejin photographed every relevant document and copied the most important computer files to her portable storage device. The evidence was overwhelming and would give Earth everything they needed to justify whatever response they chose to implement. The galaxy had not just allowed the assassination to happen, they had actively participated in planning it. As she prepared to leave Vex's office, Yang Hyejin heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was approaching and she had nowhere to hide in the small office. She quickly disconnected her device from the computer terminal and moved to the window, but they were on the 15th floor of the building with no way to climb down. The footsteps stopped directly outside Vex's office and Yang Hyejin heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. High Commander Vex was returning to his office unexpectedly, and she was trapped inside with stolen documents that would prove Earth's intelligence capabilities, if discovered. Yang Hyejin made a split-second decision that probably saved her life. Instead of trying to hide or fight her way out, she activated her emergency beacon and jumped through the window. The beacon would signal Earth's extraction team while the fall would either kill her or injure her badly enough that the Vorthans might believe she was just a confused alien who had broken into the wrong office. She fell 15 floors and landed in a decorative pond in the government complex courtyard. The water cushioned her impact enough to prevent fatal injuries, but she still broke 3 ribs and fractured her left arm. When Vorthan security found her, she was unconscious and bleeding but still alive. The Vorthans never suspected that Yang Hyejin was actually a human intelligence agent. Her forged identification held up under investigation, and they concluded that she was simply a mentally unstable alien who had broken into High Commander Vex's office for unknown reasons. They treated her injuries and deported her from Vorthan space as an undesirable alien with psychological problems. Yang Hyejin's extraction team picked her up at the edge of Vorthan space and rushed her to a medical facility on a neutral world. While she was recovering from her injuries, the stolen documents and computer files were transmitted to Earth, where they caused an immediate sensation among the leadership. Acting President Choi Min-ho called an emergency meeting of the Security Council as soon as he read Yang Hyejin's report. The evidence she had gathered proved that the assassination of President Kim Dae-ho was not the work of a rogue agent, but a coordinated attack authorized by the Vorthan government and supported by other galactic powers. "This changes everything," Admiral Park So-young said as she reviewed the documents. "We now have legal justification under galactic law to respond with military force. The assassination of a council member is considered an act of war, and the evidence proves it was officially sanctioned." Dr. Yoon Ji-woo had been using the 3 weeks of Yang Hyejin's mission to finalize her research into Vorthan biological and technological weaknesses. "I've completed development of targeted biological weapons that will affect only Vorthans without harming other species. I've also perfected the atmospheric processor sabotage technique that will shut down their life support systems." General Shin Woo-jin activated a holographic display showing the current positions of Earth's military forces throughout the galaxy. "Our ships have been quietly moving into position during the past month. We now have assets within striking distance of every major Vorthan installation. The question is no longer whether we can respond, but how extensively we want to respond." Acting President Choi Min-ho studied the faces around the table. A month ago, these people had been preparing for a theoretical conflict that might never happen. Now they were planning actual military operations that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "What are our strategic options?" he asked. "We could target only the individuals directly responsible for the assassination, Admiral," Park replied. A surgical strike that eliminates High Commander Vex and his immediate subordinates would send a clear. Acting President Choi Min-ho stood before the assembled Galactic Council on Nexus Prime, holding the evidence that Major Yang Hye-jin had risked her life to obtain. The same assembly hall where President Kim Dae-ho had been murdered 6 weeks earlier was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The atmosphere was tense because rumors about Earth's evidence had been circulating for days. Ambassador Lee Tae-min sat in the front row of the human delegation section. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were gripping his data pad tightly. He knew what was about to happen, and he had already received his orders for after the president's speech. Within hours, he and his entire staff would be evacuating Nexus Prime along with every other human in council space. Fellow council members, Choi Min-ho began. 6 weeks ago, President Kim Dae-ho was murdered in this very hall by a Vorthan assassin. You accepted the Vorthan explanation that this was the work of a rogue agent, and you closed the investigation. Today I present evidence that proves this explanation was a deliberate lie. The council chamber erupted in surprised voices and angry protests from the Vorthan delegation. High Commander Vex himself was present wearing his most formal ceremonial robes. His pale blue skin had taken on a darker shade which indicated extreme agitation or anger. Several other species representatives looked uncomfortable, as if they suspected what was coming next. Choi Min-ho activated the holographic display system and began showing the documents and recordings that Yang Hye-jin had stolen from Vex's office. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Operation Humility had been planned, approved, and executed by the highest levels of the Vorthan government, with the knowledge and consent of several other council species. This is fabricated human propaganda, High Commander Vex shouted from his delegation section. These documents are obvious forgeries designed to justify human aggression against the peaceful Vorthan Empire. The authentication codes embedded in your own government's data systems prove otherwise, Choi Min-ho replied calmly. Every document has been verified by 3 independent forensic analysis teams, including one from the neutral Kepler Union. The evidence is genuine, and it proves that the Vorthan Empire committed an act of war against Earth. The Council's senior leadership began conferring among themselves in urgent whispers. Several species had clearly known about the assassination plot in advance and were now trying to figure out how to minimize their own involvement. Others seemed genuinely shocked to learn the truth about what had happened. Even if these documents are authentic, said Chancellor Morix of the ancient Titan species, the assassination of one individual does not justify military retaliation against an entire empire. The Council calls upon Earth to accept appropriate compensation and move forward in the spirit of galactic peace. Choi Min-ho had expected exactly this response. The older species had dominated galactic politics for so long that they believed they could commit any crime and escape consequences through diplomatic manipulation. They saw humans as upstart newcomers who should be grateful for any scraps of justice the Council was willing to provide. Chancellor Morix, the evidence shows that your own species was consulted about Operation Humility and gave your approval for the assassination, Choi Min-ho said as he displayed additional documents. You and several other council leaders actively participated in planning President Kim Dae-ho's murder. This was not a crime committed by one species against another. This was a conspiracy by the galactic establishment to keep humanity in its place. The revelation that multiple species had been involved in the assassination plot created chaos in the council chamber. Representatives began shouting accusations at each other, while others demanded immediate adjournment to discuss the situation privately. The carefully maintained facade of galactic civilization was crumbling. As the truth about the conspiracy became clear, the council will recess for deliberation, Chancellor Morix announced. All species will have an opportunity to respond to these allegations through proper diplomatic channels. We call upon all parties to remain calm and avoid any actions that might escalate this unfortunate situation. Choi Min-ho smiled coldly. Chancellor Morix, there will be no recess and no deliberation. The Vorthan Empire murdered Earth's president as part of a conspiracy supported by this council's leadership. Earth demanded justice and you refused to provide it. Now we will provide our own justice. He turned to face the Vorthan delegation directly. High Commander Vex, you authorized the assassination of President Kim Dae-ho because you believed humanity was becoming too influential in galactic affairs. You thought murdering our leader would remind us of our proper place as subordinates to older and supposedly superior species. You were wrong about our place in the galaxy, and you were catastrophically wrong about how we would respond to such an attack. High Commander Vex stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Choi Min-ho. You primitive humans dare to threaten the Vorthan Empire. We have been masters of space travel since before your species discovered fire. Our fleets could crush your pathetic colonies without effort. You should accept whatever justice we choose to provide and be grateful that we allow you to continue existing. Thank you for confirming your government's responsibility for President Kim Dae-ho's murder, Choi Min-ho replied. Your arrogance and contempt for human life have been noted and recorded. The galaxy will remember your words when it sees what happens to species that believe they can murder Earth's leaders without consequences. Choi Min-ho gathered his documents and walked toward the exit, followed by Ambassador Lee and the entire human delegation. As they reached the chamber doors, he turned back to address the assembled representatives one final time. To those species who participated in or supported the conspiracy against Earth, you will face the consequences of your actions. To those species who had no knowledge of the plot, you have 48 hours to evacuate your people from Vorthan space. After that time, we cannot guarantee their safety. The human delegation left Nexus Prime within 2 hours aboard ships that had been waiting in the outer system. As their transports entered hyperspace, Admiral Park So Young transmitted the authorization, codes that activated Operation Payback. Earth's response to President Kim Dae-ho's assassination was about to begin. Commander Kang Soo-bin received the activation signal aboard the stealth ship Silent Fury, which was positioned just outside the Vorthan home system. She was 43 years old and had commanded Earth's most advanced warships for 8 years. Her crew of 60 specialists had been preparing for this mission for weeks, and every system on the ship was operating at peak efficiency. The Silent Fury was invisible to all known detection methods thanks to technology that Earth had developed in secret over the past decade. The ship could pass within a few kilometers of enemy vessels without being detected, and its weapons were specifically designed to disable rather than destroy targets when possible. All ships report ready, Kang Soo-bin announced over the secure communication channel that connected her with 17 other human ships positioned throughout Vorthan space. Operation Payback is authorized. Remember that our primary targets are military installations and government facilities. Avoid civilian casualties whenever possible, but do not let concern for civilians prevent you from completing your objectives. The coordinated attack began at exactly the same moment across all 17 Vorthan star systems. Earth ships emerged from stealth mode and launched their first strikes against orbital defense platforms, space stations, and military bases. The Vorthans were caught completely by surprise because their sensors had detected no approaching threats. On Vorthan Prime, Major Yang Hyejin watched from a safe distance as Dr. Yoonji Woo's atmospheric processor sabotage took effect. Yang had returned to the Vorthan capital secretly 2 weeks earlier to plant the devices that would disable the planet's life support systems. The processors that maintained the artificial atmosphere began shutting down one by one, leaving millions of Vorthans gasping for breath in the toxic air of their homeworld. Captain Hong Kyung-soo commanded the assault on the main Vorthan fleet, base in the Tertius system. His ship Dragon's Revenge carried weapons that could disable enemy vessels without killing their crews. The Vorthan fleet had been designed for impressive parades and intimidating demonstrations rather than actual combat. When Hong's ship began systematically destroying their weapons and engines, the Vorthan crews surrendered without putting up significant resistance. Vorthan High Command is attempting to contact Earth government, reported the communication officer aboard Kang Soo-bin's ship. High Commander Vex is demanding an immediate ceasefire and threatening retaliation against human civilians. Inform High Commander Vex that he is in no position to make demands or threats, Kang Soo-bin replied. His government murdered our president, and his military is currently being dismantled by superior forces. If he wants to discuss terms for Vorthan surrender, he can do so through proper channels. Within 6 hours of the attack beginning, The Vorthon Empire's military capabilities had been effectively eliminated. Their main fleet bases were destroyed, their orbital defense systems were offline, and their government facilities were occupied by human forces. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on Nexus Prime, 3 days after Earth's devastating assault on the Vorthon Empire. Representatives from 47 species filled the assembly hall where President Kim Dae-ho had been murdered 7 weeks earlier. The atmosphere was thick with fear and uncertainty, as species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia struggled to understand their new reality. Chancellor Morix of the Titan clans called the session to order, with a voice that trembled slightly. His ancient species had been among the galaxy's power brokers for over 5,000 years, but now he looked like an old man who had suddenly realized that his time was ending. The other senior council members sat in uncomfortable silence as they waited to hear Earth's terms for ending the conflict. Ambassador Lee Tae-min entered the assembly hall flanked by 2 human guards wearing the black uniforms of Earth's special forces. The guards were not armed with visible weapons, but their presence sent a clear message that Earth was no longer interested in pretending to be subordinate to the Council's authority. Lee took his place at the speaker's podium and activated the holographic communication system. Acting President Choi Min-ho appeared as a 3-dimensional image above the council floor. His expression was calm and controlled, but there was steel in his voice when he began to speak. Behind him stood Admiral Park So-young in her military uniform and Dr. Yoon Ji-woo holding a datapad containing information that could destroy any species in the galaxy. Fellow council members, Choi Min-ho began. 72 hours ago, Earth demonstrated our response to the murder of President Kim Dae-ho. The Vorthon Empire no longer exists as a military or political entity. Their surviving population has been relocated to designated worlds where they will live under Earth's direct supervision. High Commander Vex and 17 other government officials have been executed using their own molecular disruptor technology. The council chamber remained completely silent. Several species representatives were taking notes while others simply stared at the holographic image of Earth's leader. Everyone understood that they were witnessing a fundamental shift in galactic power that would reshape civilization for generations to come. The evidence we presented proved that multiple species participated in the conspiracy to assassinate President Kim Dae-ho. Choi Min-ho continued. Chancellor Morix, your government provided intelligence about human trade routes that was used to plan the attack. The hegemony of Krix supplied the molecular disruptor weapon. The Stellar Republic of Vega provided safe passage for the assassination team. You believed that murdering our leader would remind humanity of our proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Chancellor Morix stood up slowly. Acting President Choi, Earth's response has been noted, and the Council acknowledges that mistakes were made in handling the investigation of President Kim's death. We are prepared to offer substantial compensation and formal apologies from all parties involved. Surely this unfortunate situation can be resolved through diplomatic means rather than continued violence. Chancellor Morix, you seem to misunderstand the current situation. Choi Min-ho replied. Earth is not seeking your permission for our actions, and we are not interested in your apologies or compensation. We are informing you of the new reality that your conspiracy has created. The age of human subordination to older species is permanently ended. Admiral Park stepped forward to address the council directly. For 50 years, Earth participated in this council under the assumption that galactic civilization was based on law and justice. You taught us that assumption was wrong when you chose to cover up President Kim's murder rather than demand justice. Now you will learn what happens when humans stop believing in civilization and start believing in strength. Dr. Yoon activated her datapad and transmitted files to every representative in the council chamber. These documents contain detailed analyses of the biological and technological weaknesses of every major species in the galaxy. Earth has developed weapons specifically designed to target each of your civilizations. The precision of our attack on the Vorthons was not accidental. We can eliminate any species we choose while leaving others completely unharmed. The implications of Dr. Yoon's statement sent waves of panic through the assembled representatives. Earth had not just defeated the Vorthons through superior firepower, they had demonstrated the ability to target specific species with weapons designed to exploit their unique vulnerabilities. Every government in the galaxy was now at risk of complete destruction if they opposed human interests. "This is barbaric," shouted Representative Kell of the hegemony of Crix. "You cannot threaten entire civilizations because of the actions of a few individuals. The Council will unite against such aggression and restore order to the galaxy." Representative: "Kell, your government provided the weapon that killed President Kim," Admiral Park replied coldly. "Earth's response to your involvement will be determined by your future actions. If you choose to oppose us, you will discover that the Vorthon Empire's fate was merciful compared to what we are capable of inflicting." Acting President Choi Min-ho raised his hand for silence. "The Galactic Council as it currently exists is dissolved effective immediately. The older species have proven themselves incapable of maintaining justice or preventing aggression by their own members. Earth will establish a new system of galactic governance based on strength rather than empty diplomatic protocols." "You cannot dissolve the Council," Chancellor Morix protested. "The Galactic Council has maintained peace and stability for over 3,000 years. Destroying our civilization's most important institution will lead to chaos and war throughout the galaxy." Chancellor Morix, the Council failed to maintain peace when it allowed President Kim to be murdered, and failed to maintain stability when it covered up the conspiracy behind his death. Choi Min-ho replied, "Your institution died the moment you chose politics over justice. Earth is simply acknowledging that reality and moving forward without your interference." Ambassador Lee stepped up to the podium and began reading from a prepared statement. "Earth hereby establishes the Terran hegemony as the new governing authority for this region of the galaxy. All species that wish to participate in galactic commerce and diplomacy must acknowledge Earth's leadership and accept our authority in matters of interspecies law and security. This is conquest disguised as governance," accused Representative Thane of the Stellar Republic of Vega. "You are using military force to impose your will on species that have been civilized for millennia before humans even discovered space travel." Representative Thane, your government provided safe passage for President Kim's assassins, Admiral Park replied. "You participated in an act of war against Earth, and now you complain about the consequences. If you had wanted to maintain your independence, you should not have joined a conspiracy to murder our leader." The council session continued for 6 more hours, as Earth's representatives methodically dismantled the old galactic order and announced the terms of their new system. Species that had participated in the assassination conspiracy would face varying levels of punishment depending on their degree of involvement. Species that had remained neutral would be allowed to join the Terran hegemony as equal partners. Species that chose to oppose Earth's authority would be eliminated as military threats. Over the following months, the galaxy's political landscape transformed completely. 12 species chose to join the Terran hegemony immediately and received protection from Earth's military along with preferential trading rights. 8 species attempted to form an alliance against human expansion and discovered that their combined fleets were no match for Earth's advanced weapons and tactics. The Kepler Union requested a formal alliance with Earth and offered their services as neutral mediators in disputes between humans and other species. Their peaceful nature and reputation for fairness made them valuable partners in establishing legitimacy for the new order. Several smaller species followed their example and sought Earth's protection against larger neighbors who might threaten them. 6 months after the destruction of the Vorthon Empire, Admiral Park So-young was elected as Earth's new president. Her inaugural address was broadcast throughout the galaxy from the bridge of humanity's newest flagship, which had been named Dae-ho's Revenge in honor of the murdered president. Fellow humans and allied species, President Park began, "We stand at the beginning of a new age in galactic history. The old order based on the dominance of ancient species and the subordination of younger civilizations has been permanently destroyed. In its place, we have built the Terran hegemony based on the principle that strength and justice are inseparable." The ship's view screen showed the memorial that had been erected on Nexus Prime at the exact spot where President Kim Dae-ho had been assassinated. The memorial was made from metal, taken from destroyed Vorthon warships, and bore an inscription that could be read by any species in the galaxy. The words were simple, but their meaning was understood throughout known space. President Kim Dae-ho believed in peace and died for that belief. His death taught us that peace without strength is merely an invitation for aggression. The Terran hegemony exists to ensure that no species will ever again mistake human restraint for human weakness.